We've spoken before about how, generally speaking, the courts don't differentiate between, for want of better words, professional journalists versus citizen journalists. But there's been a couple of interesting cases recently where they've fallen either side of the divide. And also there's some new guidance that's come out from the courts. So I thought I'd just briefly bring you up to speed on all that, because I know that's something that, by definition, anybody watching this is probably interested in these sorts of things. Okay, so first of all, there was a case where it was a local councillor, and she sued a guy who basically had been running a website commenting on, the goings on in the local council. Now, as we've said before, political bodies, whether it's the government or local councils, parish councils, they cannot sue for defamation. Councillors, however, can sue in their own right if they say, well, actually, this is defaming me personally. However, there was a thing in place saying they can't use public funds to bring such cases. So this lady brought a claim in harassment, and she said this has gone way beyond legitimate journalism, and now it's just harassment. However, the court found, they said, right, okay, this guy, he's puerile, is a word they use. They said it's vulgar, it's abusive, but it is legitimate journalism, whatever the format it is in. And, as a public figure, you're effectively opening yourself up to this. So it was interesting where they drew the line, and they dismissed, this was a civil claim, and they dismissed it. And they said, no, sorry, this is just something you're just going to have to live with. But then there was another case where, again, it was somebody running sort of like a website, but he was commenting about sort of like people in the local neighbourhood and accusing them of all sorts of crimes and sort of foul, misbehaviour. And he was actually prosecuted. And I think part of the reason for that is there was actually a real murder case going on at the same time. And they said, you are prejudicing that murder case because you're effectively saying, this is all a cover-up, it's not that person, it's all, it's all my neighbours. They're all involved in it. And they said, the risk there is that you are risking prejudicing the trial. That's what we call a strict liability offence. If you do something that is deemed to risk a trial, if the jury see it and sort of go, well, hang on a second, what's all this? What's all this about? And it might affect the trial. Then it doesn't matter what your intention was. If it has or is likely to have that result, you commit the offence. Now, he wasn't actually charged with that, though. He was just charged with, just straightforward harassment. And in that particular case, he was convicted. Interestingly, though, he was only fined £250, and we've seen, in other cases, people have got, far worse for that, for arguably less. But that's a video that perhaps Dan wants to do. So that gives some examples there. But there's also this new thing. There's a case recently where 13 people attended a trial, and they just said, "Well, who are you?" And they said, "Well, we're all, we're journalists." And he said, "Do you have press cards? Do you have any accreditation?" I said, "No, we just do it. We're citizen journalists." And what was interesting there is the court said, "Well, no, sorry, I'm just going to regard you as members of the public. There's limited seating. You're just going to have to sort of queue like everybody else." Because in courts there are dedicated press benches. But what's interesting about that is there is now this idea, there's a transparency pilot for the family courts, because generally speaking, family courts, say, oh, they're secret courts. Well, they're not, but they are private courts. Journalists, though, are allowed to attend, because the idea is that, look, justice doesn't just need to be done, it needs to be seen to be done. And journalists fulfil an important role in society by telling people what's going on in the courts. And they can be trusted to say, to not reveal the names of children or to reveal the names of parties that might identify people. They know all these sorts of, contempt of court type issues. But what they've said is, well, we want to expand this and we want to get more people coming in. But initially they said we're going to restrict this scheme to accredited journalists and, quote, legal bloggers. So what's an accredited journalist? Well, accreditation is where you can apply to the various organisations, offer accreditation. I mean, the National Union of Journalists, they run a scheme, and they will look at, your previous experience. Do you have any, academic qualifications in journalism or anything like that? And there's like little tests and exams to do, and they will accredit you. And so you can say, oh, I'm an accredited journalist. You also have press cards. I mean, the National Union of Journalists, they issue them. Sometimes they're just issued by the newspapers. And it used to be that they would say to the court staff, well, check they either have a press card or a letter from the editor. But then it was, well, hang on a minute, we don't have the resources to check all this. So, this is why they're sort of trying to move to a different scheme. How they are actually going to prove this is one of the things they said in the paper. It's like, how do we actually identify who's who? And we need to sort of figure this out. But at the moment, we'll just sort of basically, we'll leave it to the court staff to decide who's real or not. But what's a legal blogger? Well, a legal blogger is somebody, they've said it's somebody with legal qualifications who, is commenting on things. Now, again, there's nothing, in statute or anything that has these different, differences. It's just the courts controlling their own process. But what's interesting is they have recognised and said, well, actually, no, this will exclude people who have a legitimate reason to be there. I mean, for a start, it will exclude any foreign journalists, but they've said it will exclude, amateur bloggers. And they said, why is it? Is there any justification for saying you must have this accreditation? Bear in mind, lots of, like, quotes, legit journalists never bothered with accreditation. The sorts of people who started off on their local, Exchange and Mart or something like that and worked their way up through the ranks. It's like, well, I don't need accreditation. I've just been doing this. I learned on the job, School of Hard Knocks and everything. And also with legal bloggers, I mean, are we any better qualified to comment on things? My argument is that, we can assist you in demystifying some of the law and the procedure. But in terms of what's going on, we're no better qualified to discuss the facts of the matter than anybody else. I mean, other people, might have a particular interest that makes them far better at commenting on these things. So they have recognised and said this will exclude people who are just amateur vloggers and bloggers, and actually arguably there's no real justification for doing that. They've said, but for the pilot scheme, we'll just test the waters and just make sure, sort of see, are people, self-regulating? Are they not disclosing information they shouldn't do? Are they understanding all the rules on reporting restrictions? But they have talked about expanding this. So yeah, it does look like we are moving towards more recognition of the fact that you don't have to be a professional, whether it's a media professional or a legal professional before you're allowed access to court. And this is things like disclosing court documents, because the press quite often do get access to stuff. And what they've said now is, now that everything's all electronic, you can't have the paper ones, but it's so easy now just to sort of go click, there you go, there's the the link to the PDF. And why shouldn't everybody, who's got a legitimate interest have access to that? So, yeah, I'll keep monitoring this because it's quite a dynamic situation. And, there's a lot of contradictions out there, inconsistencies between how the courts are addressing that. But it does seem that we are moving towards a much more sort of open, transparent justice system, which is of course the aim of the scheme. But anyway, hopefully you found that vaguely interesting. If you did, please consider clicking the like button, subscribing and sharing. Also, this is my third attempt at doing this video. I'm actually you don't have to watch this rest of it, you can see my other two attempts. I thought I'd make it really interesting and go to different places to try and do this, and it all went hideously wrong. So I think I'll just stick to doing it in my little studio. Obviously not the usual place. Hi, I'm doing this on a train because I actually went to my favourite pub to do this, but I got chatting to a really nice girl, and now I'm running a bit late. But anyway, what I'll talk about is, I've discussed how, generally speaking, the courts do not differentiate between, quotes, professional journalists and citizen journalists. There's been a few interesting cases on that recently. There was one where there was a bunch of people, 13 people turned up saying, we're journalists and we're here to report on a case. And the court said, well, are you accredited journalists? Do you have press cards? Who do you work for? And they said, well, no, we just blog about legal matters. And I said, well, that technically doesn't count, and there's only so much seating space, so we're going to regard you as members of the public. Now, like I said, there's been a little bit of controversy about that, because generally speaking, when it comes to defamation and media law, the courts don't differentiate between citizen journalists and, of course, professional accredited journalists. So first of all, what's an accredited journalist? You can gain accreditation by doing various courses. The National Union of Journalists run one, other people do, and they will look at your qualifications. Do you have any sort of degrees or anything? We've got Truro, by the way.
We'll be calling out Almost Town, Penmere, Penryn, Parallel, and Truro.
Well, thank you.
This is a security note. If you see something that doesn't look right,
See it, say it, sort it.
The British Transport Police on 61016. We'll sort it.
I should edit that out, but I probably won't.
The next thing is Falmouth Town. This is the Great Western Railway service to Truro.
Right, okay, so where were we? Yeah, so what's accreditation? Yeah, like I say, you can just sign up to a course to do it, and sometimes they'll take into account, your previous qualifications, or they'll just give you sort of a general background, and then, if you pay the fee and tick a few boxes in terms of their exams, they'll accredit you. We also used to have what called press cards, but they were just issued by, whichever newspaper you work for.
We are now approaching.
Shouldn't do in terms of contempt of court, either by prejudicing criminal trials or revealing information in family cases. But anyway, just thought you might find that useful. And also I thought I'd come out and just do it somewhere different for a change. So I'm sort of on a hilltop. I wish you could see out the window. Somebody better organised than me would have filmed, because I've got like really lovely views of the coast. But anyway, if you did enjoy that, please consider clicking the like button, subscribing and possibly sharing. And now I'm actually going to show this. This is about my third attempt of doing this in various locales. So if you want to stick around, you can see take one and why I didn't actually use it.